stages. Yeah, 10, 9. There can be frost in the coffee plantations, so it will definitely increase affect ripening levels and productivity for the farmer.
The system of a coffee farm is quite intricate. Now, it's a lot easier to leave all of that information out of the general coffee industry's marketing material. And somewhat understandably, we don't want to be too bogged down with information as we're trying to reach for our first cup of coffee in the morning. Though we feel it's beneficial to have a general understanding of the entire coffee cycle. Nothing too complicated, just simple concepts. So, we created an overview of the coffee farm as a system, in the words of the people on the ground. It's a beautiful cycle where brewer and you learn from the roaster learns from the farmer, and the farmer in turn learns from the end consumer, you. Coffee begins as a seedling and is planted in a nursery. From there, a year or so later, it is planted into the ground, and for specialty coffee that is often on the slopes of steep mountains. Usually takes about 3 years for coffee when it's first planted in the ground or in soil in general, for it to ripen and bear fruit. Now, there isn't just one variety of coffee. Of course, we're generally dealing with the Arabica species of cafe, right? However, within that, there are many, many thousands of subspecies of Arabica coffee. And we're finding in the industry more and more benefit to separating single varieties from each other, just as we do with apples, separating Fuji from Honeycrisp, from Pink Lady, from Granny Smith, etc.
So here we have Pacamara cherry. If you see, there is a lot of difference in terms of shape and of course ripeness. So this is a Pacamara. This one right here is Catuai Rojo. The third one is Ana Café 14. It's a bit unripe. And the last one is Geisha grown in Guatemala, and that is a bit riper than the rest of the cherries. So, yeah. So, what happens a lot throughout Guatemala and also other Central American countries is that producers mix the varieties, so you get a whole idea of how they might taste, but you need to taste like Caturra, Catuai, Bourbon to really tell the difference in profile. And I believe that Catuai, Caturra or Bourbon deserve this distinction, so you can understand more the potential and what they have to offer.
Can you describe the difference in taste between specifically the Pacamara and the Geisha?
Oh, so the Geisha, it's definitely more strong, like it's like a red pepper, and the Pacamara, it's more like a syrup and mild taste. It's not as strong as the Geisha, but still incredible sweet.
How do you believe that translates to the cup?
I think, it depends on the farm management and nutrition of the plant, but each variety has intrinsic characteristics. So depending on how they were grown and taken care of, they will express differently. So Pacamara can be, for me, well processed like sweet onions, and Geisha like red pepper.
And so I'm standing here in Carlos's farm right here, right behind me, is his first venture into the Geisha variety, which I'm sure most of you have heard of. But this is just spectacular, the views here. You can see behind me. It's a difficult plant to grow. It's sort of finicky, I guess. There's a lot of particulars there, but it's also quite expensive. He can get a Pacamara or another variety such as that for 15 to 30 cents a tree, a plant. But for the geisha, he actually worked with Texas A&M to get this, and paid 80 cents a tree. So much more expensive, but the results, as many of you may have tried, are spectacular. Much deeper, more dimensional. It's fantastic coffee.
La primera pasada de saneamiento la dimos y era un montón de seco. Ahorita el grano bueno, pero hay un poquito. Yo estoy viendo que el corte está mucho.
So remember I was speaking about the cleaning pickings. So basically what they were doing was selecting these ones, the dry cherries. So when the pickers come, they find less. So here the pickers come and deliver the cherries. You have the scale where you can measure how much they fit. It's a very traditional scale used throughout the coffee lands, and you deposit the coffee here. If you see that tube, he brings water to the tank so he can float the coffee, and he will only send through the depulper the ripe cherries with the right density and everything. So in this stage you get rid of the coffee pods, the dry cherries, the ones with less density, for the depulping process. He actually can choose where to direct the coffee because he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fermentation tanks. So if he's working with different varieties, remember that he has around 22, so he can send his pacamara to fermentation tank number 1 or the catuai to fermentation tank number 3, and it gives the producer flexibility and options where to process his coffee. Also, if he is waiting 32 or more hours for the coffee to ferment, he can send it to the last one that maybe is free after the pulping the coffee. Coffee ends up here and it starts depulping and depulping. I'm not quite sure how much this can do per hour, but you are it's turning around and separating the bean with the parchment and the cherries and the coffee pulp. And so just want to know where it ends. Yeah, so he can choose how much he wants to send to each of them. And right now he is fermenting, I think, the pacamara. And what he does is that he moves the coffee so he can homogenize the process, and it's more like he has the possibility of doing what he wants with this setup that is new and thought for his farm. This specific structure might not be the best structure for another farmer because you have to take into account how many varieties they have, also the volumes, and basically the preference the producer has and how he feels more comfortable working, and also the shape of the area and slope and where the dry mill is located. What happens even after floating the coffee and fermenting, you will still get some beans that are floating. So you can divide them. The beans that are heavier stay in the bottom, and the other ones float, so you can get rid of them in the process. Water is moving smoothly because of the way it has been constructed, so you don't have to put too much force to move the coffee, and it ends up here, kind of the final collection point. So you get rid of the water, and you just pick the coffee here, and you can take it to the drying space. He also uses, so he's using raised beds right now, but he's also using patios in another site to dry the coffee because production is a lot, and he won't be able to dry all coffee in this infrastructure that he has now. So he is using mostly for specialty coffee or for experimentations in this area, but he's grinding here. So depending on the climate conditions, average drying time can go from 15 to 18 days for washed coffee, and it can be up to 20 to a month for natural coffees or honey processed coffee as well. So this is an unripe cherry. So when you are depulping, basically the skin is attached to the parchment, and the depulper removes both of them. So that's why you want the cherry to be ripe and the optimal level, so you get the seed with the parchment like that. This will become a defect in the buying process because you don't want beans without the parchment. And also when you're drying them, if you don't take well care of the drying process, this can get mold or can become like black beans as well. So you don't want these ones. But it depends on the amount that you have in your coffee.